have you sit down and you guys can, sorry, we only have one mic here, but.
All right,
we'll make it work.
Thank you.
Take some questions.
Yeah,
We will. We'll
he'll,
give you some chance for questions.
yeah, he'll ask some questions and then he'll moderate a quick Q&A with some.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Sri, for all your kind words. And
I forgot to read a passage from the book, but
well,
Maybe
Go ahead.
afterwards.
we'll let you do that. How are you? In the world of foreign,
Hold the microphone up.
sure. In the world of foreign correspondence, you know, we don't meet everyone. I just wanted to tell you that some of my colleagues speak very, very well of you, and that's really important. Increasingly, as Sri said, I've been involved since the day after September 11th with the latest of whatever is developed around the world. Increasingly, the face of war isn't soldiers. It isn't people with guns. It's women. It's victims. It's children. Could you address that in your travels and what you saw there in the aftermath of the occupation?
Of course, the casualties of war are really the women and children and the men. The women in this book are mostly victims, and they're widows. There are 1 million war widows in Afghanistan. And this is not just this current war, but 30 years of war, as many of you know, starting with the communist coup, going into the Soviet invasion, and they have been battered. But at the same time, what I found was that there's this incredible resilience inside Afghanistan. I met a woman who's lost 3 sons in a rocket attack in Kabul during the Mujahideen era, when the civil war had broken out. She had 2 more kids left, and when she was telling me her story, she was smiling the entire time. And I looked at her and I said, "How can you still smile?" She said, "Because I still have two more kids left." That's what inspires me in these places. I think the children, again, there are. When I was growing up, there were beggars inside Afghanistan. It was something normal, but this time around, when I went, they didn't spot the streets. They lined them. There were so many of them. These were orphans of war, and a lot of women as well have become beggars. And in some cases, they've become prostitutes because they have to do what they have to do. There's a big trafficking ring of taking young Afghan boys, taking them to the Gulf and forcing them to become jockeys, camel jockeys. It's a very depressing picture.
When you were talking, I was thinking of one of my favorite books by V.S. Naipaul, The Enigma of Arrival, and it was all about him going to England, this place that he had heard of and that he had never visited, and living there for the first time and sort of identifying with the dream of the place, the ideas of what it was and what it actually was. How do you feel about that? What actually did you discover as opposed to what you dreamed about discovering when you first went back?
That was one of my most intense subjects to have to deal with. I think I had 2 different points in Afghanistan. There were 2 stages, from when I was born in 1973 during the monarchy to when the communist coup occurred, which was in 78. So I was 5. And before I was 5, all I remembered were, like in Helmand, on the Helmand River, we would have barbecues. My family would have dinner parties. This is co-gendered. It's not men and women. My father loved to have a good time, and we always had parties at my house. And I remember dancing coquettishly to Afghan music as a child. I don't remember anything sad. As soon as the war broke out, things changed. And as a child, the first thing I can remember is that adults being very nervous. Nobody wanted to play with me. Nobody wanted to listen to me act like I am now. That was the first memory that I had. And then all of a sudden, there was this silence in the streets. So we moved to Herat, where there had been an uprising, and things changed very quickly. My school was bombed, and that's when my family decided that they had to leave. When I went back after 20 years, I wanted to go back to the childhood of those dinner parties and dancing and the greenery and my grandfather's orchard home where there were pomegranate trees. And we used to climb up those trees with my cousins. Mulberries are very favorite fruit in Afghanistan. What kids do is they take these big sheets, and 4 children in the family will hold each corner of the sheet. And my uncles would go up on the mulberry trees and shake the branch, and the mulberries would fall onto this sheet, and they would put it in this huge round silver platter. And then all of us would gather and eat the mulberries. Those are the days I wanted to return to. And you'll read in the book that that's not what happened. The first time I returned during the Taliban, your nostalgia comes face to face with reality. And often I had these epiphanies on rooftops, because rooftops show the stark nakedness of what has happened in a country that's been torn. When you're walking around the city, you don't really see much. The same thing happened to my mother when she came to visit me in Kabul. We stood on a rooftop in Quartier Parwan, which is one of the higher elevated neighborhoods. And what I saw in that scene was kids playing, and I still had a positive picture in my mind because I was comparing it to the Taliban time. My mother just started bawling when she was looking around because she had been to this neighborhood before, and she saw the bullet-riddled buildings, she saw how skinny the children were. So our points of view was so very different. And I think that that's a key point in this experience of exile and returning to exile and reconciling nostalgia.
Well, thank you. You said some things about the negotiations now and about the current government, and there are lots of opinions about the current government and whether it is positive or negative for the country. What did you come away with from thinking about the political situation, given all that you saw there?
Ambivalence. It's such a complicated picture. Americans ask me, we're confused. Why is Pakistan doing this to Afghanistan? Why is Iran doing this to Afghanistan? I had some knowledge of the country's history when I went in, but it was really a different experience to be on the ground talking to people and understanding their vision of things. Often it's not the truth, it's perception that shapes public opinion. It's perception that even shapes that truth sometimes. For example, if you go to Afghanistan right now and you're a Pakistani, you cannot say you're Pakistani and be safe, because there's so much resentment against the Pakistani government. I don't think it's directed at the people, but it's because of this government, the military establishment, and the ISI. Afghans are very angry. And often, I've heard this several times, do you want to be colonized by the US and Britain and the West again? No, but we don't want to be colonized by Pakistan and Iran either. If the US leaves, that's what's going to happen. We don't have the capacity right now to be completely independent. We are dependent on aid. So therefore, we need some kind of aid. We need some kind of backing. This seemed to be the opinion that I ran across from city to city. In the south, it's a bit different, where the Taliban have more support in Helmand and Kandahar and Zabul and those areas. They believed that the Taliban were legitimate. There was nothing wrong with them, then they should come back. Because I think the way of life hadn't changed for them. They had been at war, they were still at war, they hadn't seen much development. Girls still couldn't go to school in those areas.